In a remote village in South Africa, a boy was born with a name that meant pulling the branch of a tree. But he would grow to pull the chains off an entire nation. Nelson Mandela, a man who would spend 27 years in prison, face unimaginable trials, yet emerge to unite a divided country and inspire the world. From the dusty hills of Kunu to the grand halls of power, his journey is one of courage, sacrifice, and unshakable hope. This is the story of the boy who became the father of a free South Africa. Let's journey into his childhood. In the quiet hills of Umkhonto, South Africa, on July 18, 1918, a boy was born. A boy whose name, Rolihlahla, meant pulling the branch of a tree, a name that hinted at a destiny of shaking the foundations of an entire nation. He was born into the Thembu royal family under the shadow of British colonial rule. His father, Gadla Henry Mafakanyeswa, was a respected chief, who taught him dignity and pride in his heritage, and his mother, Nosekeni Fanny, a devout Christian, filled their mud hut with warmth and prayer. Mandela was one of 13 children, though only 4 were born to his mother, and it was within this large, extended family that he first learned the values of unity, tradition, and resilience. But when Mandela was just 9 years old, his father's death changed everything. His mother, unable to raise him alone, took his hand and walked him to the home of a Thembu regent in Kunu. There, among rolling hills, grazing cattle, and mud huts, his new chapter began. He grew up listening to fireside stories of warriors who had stood against injustice. Those tales lit a quiet fire in his young heart. At a small mission school, a teacher, in the tradition of colonial education, gave him a new name, Nelson. It was meant to erase part of his identity, but instead, it became the name the world would one day remember. Mandela was still only a boy, yet the path to his destiny had already begun. But childhood innocence would not last forever. The world outside Kunu was changing, and soon, Nelson would step beyond the hills of his youth into schools, cities, and struggles that would shape the man he was destined to become. In Kunu's wide green fields, Mandela's world was simple: cattle grazing under the sun, evenings filled with laughter and the wisdom of elders. But his guardian, the Thembu regent, Chief Jongintaba Dalindebo, saw more for him than a life in the hills. He sent the young Mandela to mission schools, where he learned English, history, and the power of words. Mandela excelled, moving on to the prestigious Clarkberry Institute, and then to Healdtown College. Education opened doors, but it also opened his eyes. He began to see the sharp divide between white privilege and black struggle. At the University of Fort Hare, one of the few institutions for black South Africans, Mandela studied law and met future leaders, but his time there was cut short. When students protested against unfair rules, Mandela stood with them. The punishment was swift: expulsion. It was his first direct clash with authority, and his first taste of the cost of standing for what is right. Mandela left Fort Hare with no degree, but with something far more valuable: the conviction that change demands sacrifice. Add transition. That conviction would follow him to Johannesburg, where his real battle and his rise as a leader would begin. With his education cut short and an arranged marriage looming, Mandela made a choice that would change everything. He ran. He boarded a train to Johannesburg, a city alive with gold mines, ambition, and the deep scars of racial segregation. Life here was far from royal. He worked as a mine security guard, a clerk, and ran errands to survive. But Johannesburg also brought him something priceless: connections. It was here he met Walter Sisulu, the man who would become both mentor and friend, introducing him to the African National Congress. In 1944, Mandela married Evelyn Mays, a nurse. They had 4 children together. But the demands of political activism, long absences, and growing differences put their marriage under strain. By 1958, the pressures of the struggle ended their union. Mandela enrolled at the University of Witwatersrand to finish his law studies, one of the few black students in a sea of white faces. He endured racism daily, but he also sharpened his mind, his voice, and his belief that the law could be a weapon for justice. By the mid-1940s, He was not just surviving the city, and he was rising within it, ready to take his place in a growing struggle that would soon consume his life. But what began as youthful ambition was about to transform into a lifelong mission, one that would demand sacrifice, courage, and unbreakable resolve. Johannesburg was a city of sharp contrasts: skyscrapers for the rich, shacks for the poor, and laws that made freedom a privilege of skin color. Mandela had seen enough to know the system of apartheid had to fall. In 1944, alongside Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, he co-founded the ANC Youth League, a force of young, determined activists demanding change. At first, they fought with petitions, speeches, and peaceful protests. Mandela's charisma and fearlessness began to stand out, but the apartheid regime tightened its grip. Passed laws restricted movement. Police violence crushed demonstrations. The Sharpeville Massacre of 1960, where police opened fire on unarmed protesters, shattered the hope that peaceful protest alone could end oppression. Mandela's vision shifted. The struggle would need more than words. In secret, he began organizing Umkhonto Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, the armed wing of the ANC. His life was no longer just about law. It was about liberation, no matter the risk. But the higher he rose, the closer danger crept, and soon, the hunter would become the hunted. (1964). The courtroom is tense. The man in the dock is no ordinary defendant. He is the face of a movement. The government fears. Nelson Mandela and his comrades are on trial for sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow apartheid in what becomes known as the Rivonia Trial. The penalty could be death. When it's his turn to speak, Mandela does not plead for mercy. Instead, he delivers a statement that will echo across history. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The world listens. Newspapers print his words. Leaders abroad call for his release. But the court is unmoved. Mandela is sentenced to life imprisonment. As he is led away, he does not look defeated. For Mandela, prison will not be an end. It will be another battlefield. And from behind bars, his voice will only grow louder. And on the rocky shores of Robben Island, where chains bite and hope is tested, Mandela's real test of endurance begins. The ferry cuts across the cold waters, carrying Mandela to a place meant to break him, Robben Island. His cell is barely large enough to stretch his legs. The bed is a thin mat on stone. Days are spent breaking rocks under the burning sun. Nights are cold, lonely, and silent. Letters from home are rare, often censored. Visits are tightly controlled. But instead of crushing him, prison shapes him. Mandela becomes a teacher, turning the island into what inmates call the University of Robben Island. He studies, he listens, he mentors. Even the guards over time begin to respect his discipline and dignity. Outside, the world starts chanting his name. Free Nelson Mandela becomes a global cry. But inside, he keeps his focus, not on freedom for himself, but freedom for all. Year after year, the bars remain, yet so does his unbroken spirit. And as the years stretch on, the world begins to shift. The struggle moves beyond Robben Island's walls toward a fight that will test nations, ignite movements, and bring Mandela closer to destiny. By the 1980s, Mandela had been a prisoner for over 2 decades. But outside the prison walls, his name had become a rallying cry. From the streets of Soweto to the halls of the United Nations, voices demanded his release. Musicians sang about him. Activists marched for him, and world leaders placed sanctions on South Africa's apartheid regime. Inside prison, Mandela was offered conditional freedom if he abandoned the struggle. He refused every time. Freedom meant nothing if his people remained chained. His wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, had been his partner in the fight. Since their marriage in 1958, they had 2 daughters, and during his imprisonment, Winnie became a powerful and controversial type of figure in her own right. But the years apart, political pressures, and public scrutiny strained their relationship beyond repair. The pressure became unbearable for the government. And on February 11, 1990, the gates finally opened. Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, tall, steady, and unshaken, raising his fist to the sky. After 27 years, the world saw him not as a broken man, but as the living symbol of resistance and hope. What the regime thought would silence him instead amplified his voice. His fight was far from over. In fact, it was about to enter its most important chapter. 1994. South Africa stands at the edge of history. For the first time, every citizen, black and white, has the right to vote. Millions line up at polling stations, their ballots carrying the weight of centuries of struggle. When the results are announced, Nelson Mandela is declared the first black president of South Africa. Nelson Mandela ukongiwe njengomongameli wokukala omnyama wa Mzansi Afrika. The nation erupts in celebration. But Mandela's victory speech is not one of revenge, it is one of reconciliation. He invites his former jailers to his inauguration. He extends a hand to those who once oppressed him, in a moment watched worldwide. He wears the green and gold jersey of the mostly white Springboks rugby team, uniting a country once torn apart. Mandela knows the harder task lies ahead, healing a divided nation. But as the cheers fade, Mandela knows that winning freedom was only the beginning. The true test will be governing a fractured nation. In 1999, after just one term, Nelson Mandela does something rare among leaders. He steps down voluntarily. His mission as president complete, he turns his focus to causes that still weigh heavily on South Africa. He launches the Nelson Mandela Foundation, fighting poverty, inequality, and HIV/AIDS, a crisis claiming millions of lives. He speaks out for peace in war-torn nations, becoming a global elder statesman whose moral authority transcends borders. Mandela also uses his influence to mentor young leaders, reminding them that power means service, not domination. He receives more than 250 honors worldwide, including the Nobel Peace Prize. But his true pride lies in the freedom of his people. Even as age and illness begin to slow him, his voice remains a call for justice, compassion, and unity. Mandela has left politics, but he has not left the fight. Yet even legends cannot escape time. And soon, South Africa and the world would face the painful reality of saying goodbye to Madiba. December 5, 2013. The news sweeps across the world. Nelson Mandela has passed away at the age of 95. South Africa mourns as thousands gather in stadiums, villages, and city streets. Leaders from every corner of the globe arrive to pay their respects, a testament to a man whose life transcended borders. In his final years, Mandela had retreated from public life, choosing peace with his family and the quiet of his home. Yet his presence remained everywhere, in the laughter of children who would never know apartheid, in the pride of a nation that once walked in chains. His journey, from a rural boy herding cattle to a prisoner in a tiny cell, to the president of a free South Africa, had proven one truth. Courage and forgiveness can change the course of history, but every fight, no matter how noble, has an end. And so came the final chapter of Nelson Mandela's story. Mandela's legacy is eternal. Share his story, honor his journey, and let the lessons of his life inspire you to stand for what is right. His life ended in 2013, but his fight didn't. In fact, it's about to enter its most important chapter, the one carried by you, me, and everyone who believes in justice. I have a question for you. Mandela's teacher gave him the name Nelson to erase his African identity. But here's the real challenge for you. Did colonial powers succeed in weakening African identity through education, with effects still felt today? Or did they fail that they accidentally created fearless leaders like Mandela who turned their system against them? There's no middle ground. Share your thoughts in the comment section. For educational purposes only, no hate comment.
Hey, thanks for watching this amazing story, and welcome to Video Biographer, where every life has a story and every story deserves to be told. If you believe that every person has a journey worth knowing, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a life story that could inspire or inform you. Ready to explore more? Choose one of the videos on your screen. and discover a life that you should know about. This is Video Biographer, where stories live and life speak. See you in my next video. If there's a life story you'd like me to cover, drop your suggestion in the comments. Until then, stay blessed and take care.